Thanks for the introduction. Today I'm going to talk to you on the 7 universal truths to data analytics when using Tableau. A bit of a grand title, but I'll take you through over the next 20 minutes or so some of the thoughts that I've come up with on this. So I'm Ali Motion. I've been using Tableau for around 3 years since joining Process Evolution as a consultant back in 2015. Primarily work with emergency service clients, so that's police forces and fire services. Really trying to help them with their enabling them to have evidence-based decision making. Prior to joining Process Evolution, I spent 8 years working with the British Airways Operation Research Team on a variety of areas, including cabin crew and flight crew rostering, commercial projects, and then latterly revenue management. So why have I chosen to give this talk? Over the last 10 years or so, I've seen a lot of analysis, some of it good, some of it bad, and some of it plain ugly. So what I hope to do over the next 20 minutes or so is to run through some of the pitfalls in which I've seen, and really trying to talk a little bit around the process in which you might put yourself through. This is not a technical talk, more about that process that you may go through as an analyst of assessing your own work and thinking how we can improve things. In my current role, I head up the Process Evolution Continuous Improvement Program. One of the key elements around this is reflecting on what we've done, how could we improve it, a bit of self-reflection there. And I think that's always key as someone who's doing analysis to actually analyse what you're doing yourself. Could you improve the processes? Are there ways of making those improvements? So my first rule is do no harm. So doctors take a Hippocratic oath before they start practicing. As analysts, we're not asked to do that, but maybe that's something that we should think about. So the first piece on do no harm is really around avoiding deception. So whether we're talking here about avoiding truncating accesses, inconsistent scaling, cherry picking of time periods, it's really around making sure that the analysis that you're putting forward is a true reflection of what should be there. I think the other things in there is a question to ask yourself around: does my viz or the product that I'm putting out, does it add value? And also think in the back of your mind, what is it being used for? Is this a suitable use of the analysis? I think the next thing to think about here is analysis as a construct. So one of the things, my big bugbears or pet peeves, is when people say, the data says this. Now, we hear that a lot, especially from junior analysts, and I think there's that expectation that if I present the data and say the data says this, that's fine. It feels like it's used to absolve the analyst of all responsibility, but actually why I'm saying analysis as a construct is really around the fact that you've chosen the data source, the fields, the filters, the parameters, the date ranges. The methodology as an analyst has been left up to you. So therefore you've got to at some point take some responsibility and think, actually this analysis that we've got here is something that I've constructed. And I think on that, there's a lot of different paths you can take. We see this with Makeover Monday, where people are given the same data set but come up with some very different analysis, different insights, and actually the choices you make throughout your analytical process influence the outputs. And I think just being aware that choices matter is probably one of the key messages that I have today. Seek not to just to answer, but to understand. So I think what I'm really looking here about is when we're talking about looking to have an understanding rather than just to answering the question. I've got an example for if I was to still be working with an airline. A typical question you might get from a revenue management team or in a management meeting is, what's happening with business class bookings on route X? Now, the numbers would suggest, so looking at doing the quick analysis, saying, well, we're down 12% versus last year on that route. Okay, that is an answer, but actually it's not really an understanding of the issue or telling you what's going on. So, first of all, is down 12% good or bad? Typically you would say it's bad, but actually there could be instances where if we'd sold out too cheaply last year, then actually down 12% at this point might be fine. But also down 12%, well, how are the other comparable routes looking? Is this a case that 12%, where the rest of the routes are down 25%, actually down 12 isn't bad? And also then, okay, so say we are down, what's causing it? So is it this market in the UK? Is it the Australian market? Very much depends on what's causing it would determine the actions that you take. So really searching for the context and then trying to go pop beyond the answer and say, okay, so what? If we're down 12%, what does that mean? What are the actions and the potential solutions that come from this? So really here we're seeking not just to get the number, but actually understand the context and then what we're going to do about it here. One of my favourites here is that bar charts are the broccoli of the data viz world. Broccoli, few people's favourite vegetables. Not particularly exciting, but everybody would pretty much attest that broccoli is good for you. So bar charts are like broccoli. Is that a good comparison? Well, here we've got a very, very simple bar chart here. And I suppose the issue, or the thing we can take from a bar chart is, it is simple. It allows the comparison between different attributes. Here we've got a comparison of sales using Superstore data, looking at the regions. We've got furniture, office supplies, west and south regions. And we can quite clearly see, very easily here, that in both furniture and office supplies for 2017, the west had higher sales than south for both pieces there. Generally, the audience know how to read them, and you would say, yeah, typically a bar chart is a safe choice. So if we're not using bar charts, a lot of people tend to get to look at more complex ideas. So what I've got here is a graphic from Andy Cotgreave. So it appeared in his blog back in October 2015, and it looks at the spectrum between function and beauty. So on the left, you've got sort of Stephen Few's approach, where it's very much around making things very functional, and then you've got McCandlish on the right-hand side with data is beautiful. Now, what I'm tending to see more and more is that people are trying to be, especially in a corporate world, people are trying to be more complex and come out with some very interesting or more appealing graphics. Now, depending on your industry and your role, there's potentially a place for that. I think it's just remembering that actually sometimes we see complexity for the sake of complexity, and actually just keeping things simple might be more effective. So my fourth point is very much around everyone having a different viewpoint of the world, or as I've said here, the world view. So what we're looking at this saying, there's sort of three things I want to touch on here. Is as a consultant or as an analyst here, try and position yourself in your client's shoes. So from their perspective, why are they asking this question? Who are they? What are they asking? And what actions could they be looking to drive or achieve? So from their point of view, what are they saying? Now, a lot of the time the analysis will speak for itself. You'll do what you're asked to do, come back with a number and some explanation around it, that's fine. Thinking it from the client's point of view, that can give you some insight into sort of the follow-up questions that they're going to ask. And that first piece really partners the second one, which is really about empathy. So empathy is probably one of the most important skills or soft skills within the analytical community. So putting things into perspective, really the empathy side of things is around understanding why they're asking this question and what can be done about it. Finally, I think it is about perspective. So as an analyst, you might spend days or weeks on a particular set of slides. They're the biggest thing to you. That is your work for a period of time. But the client may only see this, or the audience may only be seeing this visualization for 30 seconds, a minute or so. So just understanding that you need to boil things down. Clients that I've worked with typically have 8 to 10 meetings a day. As a result, if you can really put across a boiled down version of the events that can really help you. Point 5, does the analysis pass the sniff test? So when we talk about the sniff test, it's really about, do you believe the analysis and what it's telling you? So do you believe the analysis and what it's telling you? Is it at all controversial? So especially when you've been asked to show something, what is the null hypothesis? What are people expecting to see? And if we're going to come back with something very different, are we in a position to react to the challenges? Can we back up the analysis that's been done? Can you justify your approach? And then possibly the most important thing, checking your work. Has it been checked properly? Have you done the quality assessment? It's never nice to go back to a client or a group that you've been presenting to and say, actually, I may have got that wrong. First of all, it kills your credibility. But secondly, once the genie's out the bottle, it's very hard to get those numbers back. I think from a point of view of Tableau, the more complexity that you're adding, so when you start to do things like level of detail calculations and table calculations, and the more complex your approach becomes, the more vital it is to ensure that it's properly checked. And there's always a question when I'm seeing someone's analysis that doesn't quite make sense. Okay, what process did you go through to check that the outputs were correct? Talk me through your QA process to see where any particular issues may arise. My sixth point is defaults are not your friends. I think just touching on this before, we've got the iceberg analogy. So the visualization, or what you put on the screen, is only a small proportion of your overall analysis. So very much like an iceberg, that most of the mass is underneath the water, the visualization, or the piece that you show, is this small part, whereas there's other things that have gone on. So your data gathering, methodology design, calculations, cleansing of the data, sense checking, they all go in as part of the analytical process. But this little piece that you've got, the visualization or the slides that you put together, are the output that people see. So thinking about that in the context, people are only going to see your visualization. So when I'm saying defaults are not your friends, actually the choices you make on the visualization that you're showing to people actually say something about you. So when I talk about the choices, I'm saying color, font, design, the chart types, and the annotations you put on. So on the right hand side here, we have a very bog standard sales chart that's come from about 2 minutes work in Superstore data. But actually looking at this quote from some work that I did almost a decade ago, when a client gave some feedback, they said, well, yeah, everything you did seemed to make sense, but you didn't make any effort in terms of the slides. You've shown me the defaults from the program you've got. If you couldn't be bothered to make this look pretty, or at least put a little bit of effort into it, how do I know that you've made the effort and done all the checks it needs to be? So there is that whole piece about credibility, that sometimes it's worth just spending a little bit more time on your visualization, because the design and the choices you're making there, because actually that's what people are going to see in the end. Point 7, your analysis is your responsibility. So we've got a quote here from Mark Twain: "A lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can get his boots on." So I think the interesting bit for me here is that it's your responsibility when you're doing an analysis, getting it right the first time. And I don't mean get it right in terms of making sure that the viz you make straight away makes sense. I mean, when you're going to present to someone, making sure that what you put across is the right version, the single version of the truth. Anything you say in a presentation has the ability to go right around the organisation very quickly. Once it's out the bottle, once you've said that, people will run with it. And there's plenty of examples in my past of people seeing things that's become gospel before people have really had a chance to check it out. I think the final piece on that is also to know the limitation of your analysis. Being explicit about them, i.e. putting that on the slide, or at least talking around them. So really interesting piece in Hans Rosling's book, Factfulness, around the straight line instinct, or the fallacy around that, that in many cases when people see if you're seeing a 10% rise year on year, they assume that will continue forever. And a lot of that is saying, well, actually, the analysis that's been done might only be good for 3 months, 6 months, that sort of period. So knowing the limitations of your analysis and being able to project that, or at least talk around that, can be very important. So in summary, my 7 points here are: do no harm, seek not to just to understand, seek not to answer but to understand. Bar charts are the broccoli of the data viz world. Everyone has a different worldview. Does the analysis pass the sniff test? The defaults are definitely not your friend, and I need to take responsibility. So your data, your responsibility. Finally, as I'm a consultant looking to over deliver after under promising, I think one of the things that struck me recently is that you have far more power than you think. So I've got a tweet here that I sent out as part of the Cole's Great Storytelling with Data Challenge. So this was about finding a less than ideal chart, revisiting it, and showing a different view. So in that, I've put together a bit of analysis, put it out there, and a month later it's had over 4,500 impressions. And I'm not saying it's gone viral, but there's plenty of examples of things going viral far better than this. All I'm saying is I hadn't really thought too much about that. I'd put it up into social media, and pretty shocked by the reach that I had there. And there's certainly, for a corporate world, there's a view there around, well, if I am doing things, if I'm putting together visualizations and that sort of things, I would always suggest people write it as if it's going to the board. That way you won't be embarrassed. So a lot of times people will talk about, well, design with your audience in mind. I think that's great. You should keep that in mind as well, but also making sure that you're putting things in that if it were to go up 1 or 2 levels of management, then actually you're not going to be embarrassed by the product. You're putting out something that you think makes sense. So that's my summary today. 7 points. Hopefully there's some bits and pieces in there that help you guys. Thank you very much.